My name is Zoe. I am the branch manager at the Washougal Library for Fort Vancouver Regional Libraries. Before we start, I just want to ask that you keep your microphones muted until the end, and we'll have maybe some time for some questions. Just a reminder that this is a library program, so library rules of conduct do apply here as they would in the library. And I do want to mention that we are recording this, and there will be a video shared on the library's YouTube page at a later date. So now I'd like to introduce Emily Penn from Ripple Wellness. Emily is a functional nutritionist, a health coach. She uses root cause whole body approach and provides simple personalized recommendations that are easy to apply to your everyday life. So without further ado, Emily, I'm going to hand it off to you.
All right, thank you so much, Zoe. Okay, guys, so I am going to share my screen with you because I've got a presentation all lined up. So we'll just make sure that we're all good and just give me a thumbs up. Looks good? Cool. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. We're going to be talking about the foundations of healthy eating, okay? Before we get started, I just want to mention this webinar is about learning, getting inspired, and feeling empowered over your health, and it is not medical advice and should not be construed as such. So a little bit about me for those who don't know. I'm certified in functional nutrition. So that comes from the functional medicine background where, like Zoe said, it's more of a root cause whole body approach. So we're taking everything into consideration. I've been with Ripple since 2017, and I work with a variety of different health concerns. So everything from digestion to autoimmunity, inflammation, chronic pain, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, weight loss, food relationship stuff, and mental health too. And that's of particular interest to me, the connection between what we eat and our mental health. And for anyone who is not familiar with Ripple, we're a multidisciplinary clinic in Washougal. We offer naturopathic medicine, acupuncture, massage, nutrition, mental health counseling, and yoga and breathwork sessions. So if you're not already on our email list and you would like to be, you can drop your email in the chat and we will add you to our list. All right, we're going to get into it. And like Zoe mentioned, we're going to try to save some time at the end for Q&A. So if you have questions, just hang on to them till the end. And you can either pop on video or you can put them in the chat and I will do my best to answer them, okay? So before we get into the foundations of healthy eating, I want to introduce to you the guiding principle that I use and that is very common in functional medicine as well. So, you know, a lot of mainstream nutrition advice tends to be very specific, right? It's don't eat this, don't eat that, eat vegan, eat paleo, eat keto, things like that, right? And these blanket recommendations don't take the individual into account. A good example is intermittent fasting, right? We all hear about the benefits of intermittent fasting. Mostly all those studies have been done on men, right? So we don't understand necessarily how it impacts women. And some recommendations, you know, they might work generally for people, right? Like eat more vegetables. That's generally going to be a good recommendation for someone, right? But nutrition is actually highly individual. So I'm going to show you how to individualize these foundations as well. And so this principle is called bioindividuality, and that recognizes that our genes, our metabolism, nutritional needs, our glucose responses, and other biomarkers can vary greatly between us. And there's actually no one size fits all approach to nutrition or health. And we all have different lifestyles, different preferences, different health histories, and routines that make certain ways of eating practical or not so practical, right? So keep that in mind. And as we go through the presentation as well, I'll be giving you sort of some guidelines or some tips on how to personalize the foundations. So with that being said, let's get into the foundations. Foundation number 1, blood sugar balance. So from my perspective, this is an absolutely foundational piece of health because it directly impacts almost every other system function in our body, right? So when we have imbalanced blood sugar, it contributes to fatigue, struggles with energy, cravings, sleep issues, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, weight gain, type 2 diabetes, and a number of other conditions where blood sugar is a factor. So I think it's one of the most important also because with every meal we eat, we're going to have a blood sugar response or not, right? So it really directly impacts us multiple times a day. So putting your focus on blood sugar balance, I think is very important. So what does balanced blood sugar look like? So I'm going to give you some numbers and some parameters, and I just want you to keep in mind too, I'm coming from the functional perspective, and when it comes to lab ranges and values and things like that, it's usually like more of an optimal range, right? Typical conventional lab ranges tend to be broader, and they are looking at, as long as you're not blatantly sick, you're okay because you're in this range. And the functional perspective looks a little bit more narrowly to optimize. So depending what you're reading or who you're talking to, these numbers might be slightly different. But a fasting blood sugar ideally is between 75 and 90. Above 99 is prediabetes, and then 126 or higher is cause for concern. Your A1C level, which is basically a reflection of the last 3 months of your overall kind of blood sugar patterns. The ideal is between 4.6 and 5.3, 5.4 to 6% is diabetes, or excuse me, prediabetes, and above 6% is cause for concern and could indicate diabetes. And keep in mind, one blood sugar spike does not mean you have diabetes, right? So it's overall looking, the diagnosis that they usually use is if you have an elevated A1C and then fasting glucose 126 or higher on 2 or more separate occasions. So it's kind of the combination of all of that. What does balanced blood sugar feel like? We can really use how we feel to give us a lot of information and feedback about our blood sugar levels. So when it's imbalanced, we have energy dips, we might have mood swings, we might get hangry. I know a lot of us, myself included, are familiar with the hanger. It happens. And also cravings, usually for sugar and carbohydrates. So balanced blood sugar feels like a steady energy, stable mood. You're hungry between meals, but it's not so urgent. Like you're not gonna, hurt somebody if you don't get a snack. And also fewer cravings. And what does balanced blood sugar look like? I wanted to provide this just for people who are more visual learners. I think this can be really impactful. So if you don't already follow the Glucose Goddess on Instagram, I would recommend doing so. She has a lot of really great information. She also has 2 really great books that the library probably has. And so on her Instagram page, she does these really cool graphics where she shows the impacts of different foods on her blood sugar. And keep in mind, it's her blood sugar levels, right? So it might not look exactly like this for everybody, but you can just see the difference. We have 2 breakfast options here, right? So we have a bagel with cream cheese and orange juice. Delicious, but high in carbohydrates, high in sugars. You see we're having that blood sugar spike just up into the red zone. And then about an hour to an hour and a half after eating, we have the dip. And that's when you feel hangry. That's when you have cravings. You might feel anxious, lightheaded, nervous, kind of shaky when you get that blood sugar dip, right? On the other hand, we have an omelet with ham and cheese. So very low in carbohydrates, mostly protein and healthy fats. And you can see that really doesn't have much of an impact on our blood sugar at all. We still kind of hang out right around that baseline there. So how do we balance our blood sugar? It's really pretty simple, which is the good news. It's very easy, and we have an opportunity to do it with every meal and snack that we have. So I would say the most overarching kind of thing to look at with blood sugar is really look at your meal composition. So prioritizing protein and a source of healthy fats and some fiber, usually in the form of vegetables or fruits or whole grains at every meal, especially breakfast. And I emphasize breakfast because if we start out the day with that bagel and orange juice, right, we're having the blood sugar spike, we're crashing, and then we're kind of like working uphill for the rest of the day because we're trying to course correct that blood sugar swing that might make you, crave fast sugar or fast energy again, because that's what's happening, right? Your body's like wanting to bring your blood sugar back up. It's trying to get itself back to baseline. So then you end up having a muffin and a latte, and then you feel good for a while, and then you have another blood sugar dip. So you're kind of just trying to play catch up all day. But starting with a really protein rich breakfast and a really blood sugar balancing breakfast can be really helpful for keeping you steady throughout the day. The next thing I would suggest is reducing or eliminating refined carbohydrates and sugar. And this is just one of the simple things because refined carbs and sugar will for sure have an impact on your blood sugar, right? And so reducing those can be really helpful. They usually come in the forms of more processed foods anyways that are not great for overall health. So that's something to look at. A really fun thing you can do too is starting your meals with a salad or a low starch veggie. So just by having some vegetables first, the fiber kind of creates like a buffer in your gut, basically. So then when you do have a carbohydrate or sugar come in, it actually blunts the blood sugar response a little bit. So I love this for eating out. Like say you're going to your favorite Italian restaurant or you're going out for pizza, you can order a veggie appetizer to share with the table, or a small size salad, or you could even have some crudité, some chopped up fresh vegetables before you go. And that'll help, you still get to enjoy the pizza and the pasta and the delicious meal, but you might just feel better afterwards because you won't have such a blood sugar spike. Apple cider vinegar is another really cool thing. So there's a compound in apple cider vinegar and other vinegars as well called acetic acid. And when we have it before carbohydrate or sugar rich meals, it actually blunts our blood sugar response and can keep it lower. So that's a cool thing. 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in water before a meal, and that can help. And then movement after meal. So it can be really simple, going for a short walk, getting up, doing the dishes, dancing. It does not have to be like a full-blown workout or anything like that. Even just a little bit of movement, basically anything besides staying planted on the couch after a meal can help. And the reason for that is the sugar in your blood has a purpose, right? It needs to fuel your muscles. So it gets used up before it can rise in your blood. And there are other factors that impact blood sugar too. So we look at nutrition, but we also look at lifestyle things from the functional perspective too. So sleep, stress, and exercise are all things that can have an impact on our blood sugar. So this is kind of a depressing fact, but just one night where we're underslept or we have poor quality sleep, we'll have higher blood sugar responses to foods the next day, just because we're a little bit underslept. And I know a lot of us are underslept. So prioritizing sleep is actually really great for your blood sugar. Stress is another thing that can impact your blood sugar. So you can see on the graphic again from the glucose goddess, you'll see when there's a stressful meeting, she's having a blood sugar spike. And that's not because she's like stress eating Twizzlers during the meeting. That's your body's fight or flight response. So when our stress response is activated, that's your body releasing sugar from our muscles or from our liver, because our body's perceiving like, oh, I might have to fight or flee right now. So it's getting ready and giving you the energy to do that. So chronic stress can impact blood sugar levels. And then exercise can be really helpful for making us more insulin sensitive and overall bringing down blood sugar levels. So some sort of movement, doesn't have to be crazy stuff. Walking is, really great and effective exercise too. And then personalize it. So, we're all going to have slightly different blood sugar responses to different foods. So what I suggest is finding the foods that make you feel your best. And you can do this by just starting to pay attention how you feel about an hour to 90 minutes after a meal. If you're feeling tired, like you need a nap, if you're feeling a little anxious, a little weird, or you're like, I just need something sweet, that might be an indication that the meal that you ate prior was not the most blood sugar friendly, right? On the contrary, if you're feeling good, energized, and satisfied, and you're like, okay, cool, I can go another couple hours before I eat, then that's an indication that your meal was probably pretty blood sugar friendly. And you can keep a food journal to help you identify patterns that can be really, really helpful. Try out different breakfasts with different sort of compositions and see how you feel. Like, do I feel good with an avocado toast, or do I want to do more of like that omelet with the cheese and the ham that we saw? And how do I feel and how hungry do I get after that, right? There's also, you can test your blood sugar. You can buy that at any pharmacy. Continuous glucose monitors are really useful too. If you have access to that, you can sometimes get a prescription from a doctor. And there are also online places where you can just purchase them and try that. And basically what that does is it's continuously measures your blood sugar throughout the day. And a lot of them have apps that will kind of tell you like, oh, that spiked your blood sugar, or oh, your blood sugar is low. So it'll kind of give you a lot of feedback and information. They're not meant to be worn all the time, but doing it for like a 2-week period just to get some feedback and information can be super helpful and kind of fun. Okay, foundation number 2, fighting inflammation. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with the concept of inflammation, and know that too much of it is a problem. So when it comes to our health, inflammation is at the root of almost every chronic disease and health ailment that we're seeing nowadays. And I think there's also this message out there that we want to reduce inflammation as much as possible. We don't want any inflammation. So I just want to clarify, we do need inflammation. It's actually a very important process that takes place in our body. We need it to heal our injuries or to fight off illnesses, but too much, too often, that's where we start to see issues, right? So if we come into contact with a germ, we want our body to, or our immune system to get activated and have that inflammatory response, because that's how it's going to fight off a virus. Same thing with a cut. When it turns red and swells up, that's inflammation at play. And we want that kind of inflammation. We just don't want it to go on too long. Signs of chronic inflammation. So I've listed out some physical signs that might indicate you've got some inflammation going on. So joint and muscle pain, that's pretty persistent. Autoimmunity, chronic fatigue, sleep issues, depression, anxiety, and other mood disorders, gut issues, weight gain or weight loss, frequent infections, and then skin issues too. So like redness, eczema, hives, things like that. Inflammation has a role in all of these conditions. So how do we keep inflammation in check using our food? So avoiding the foods that are known to contribute to inflammation would be the first side of this coin. So avoiding, again, you're going to see these refined carbohydrates and the more processed foods. You know, a lot of those have been stripped of fiber, stripped of nutrients, and there's a lot of different ingredients depending on what you're eating that could potentially contribute to inflammation. Vegetable oils, and especially fried foods. So there's some debate on the vegetable oils. And when I say vegetable oils, I mean like canola, soybean, safflower, sunflower, rice. Is rice bran one of them? Yeah, rice bran. That kind of like all the stuff that you'll see pretty often in processed foods. That's mostly where they show up, but they also show up in fried foods. So there's some debate on, you know, because there's a heart healthy recommendation with the canola oil. So there's a little bit of debate there. But basically they have the potential to contribute to inflammation because of their high omega-6 content. We need a balance between omega-3s and omega-6s. There's a ratio where our body's pretty happy and inflammation is kept in check. And the problem with those vegetable oils is they tend to be higher in omega-6s, throwing that ratio off, right? Particularly fried foods, because they tend to use that oil repeatedly. And so every time that oil is heated, it kind of breaks down the fatty acids in there, and that can contribute to inflammation too. So reducing that. Added sugars, too much sugar is an inflammation driver. Alcohol, it's a bummer, but alcohol tends to drive inflammation as well. And then any personal food sensitivities, which I'll get into in just a second. Okay, so the flip side of that coin is consuming foods that are high in antioxidants, because antioxidants are really the antidote to inflammation. They help neutralize the inflammation and cool everything down. So some of the foods that are highest in antioxidants, dark leafy greens, berries, wild-caught salmon, and other smaller fish like sardines and mackerel, olive oil, herbs and spices like ginger, turmeric, garlic, and cayenne. Also any fresh green herb like parsley, cilantro, rosemary, dark chocolate, and green tea. So to touch on food sensitivities, they do seem to be becoming more common. And these are the most common ones that show up in people. And, you know, when we have a food sensitivity, it's not the same as a food allergy, right? A food allergy, we're having an allergic, sometimes life-threatening reaction. A food sensitivity, we're still having an immune response, but it's not life-threatening, and it might not always be obvious and immediate, right? So gut issues are pretty common with food sensitivities, but it also may manifest as joint pain, skin issues, sleeping issues, anxiety, things like that. So, and it can be delayed. It might not happen immediately after you eat a food. It might happen the next day. But these are the most common ones: gluten, dairy, soy, grains, eggs, and nuts. And we don't, not everybody's going to have these food sensitivities, but if you do have an inflammatory condition going on or a gut thing going on, it's definitely worth looking into. And then other factors contributing to inflammation, these will probably look very familiar. Stress, lack of sleep, and lack of movement can all contribute to inflammation levels in our body as well. So personalizing, supporting inflammation. Find ways to regularly incorporate these anti-inflammatory foods in ways that you like and that you can sustain. So, for me, what that looks like, I love doing smoothies with wild blueberries and spinach, and I'm getting anti-inflammatory foods there. I always combine it with protein and a source of fat for blood sugar balance. But I know I'm getting like a nice anti-inflammatory smoothie that way. I like incorporating fresh herbs as often as I can. And curries are really great because they incorporate that ginger and turmeric and vegetables and things like that. So maybe just making a curry dish or some sort of turmeric involved dish once a week is just an easy way to kind of incorporate those things. And then identify any personal food sensitivities through an elimination diet. So like I said, not everybody has to complete an elimination diet, but if you do have an inflammatory condition going on that you're trying to figure out and wondering if food could be impacting it, then it's definitely worth checking out. And foundation number 3, nourishing the gut. We've all been hearing so much about our gut health for the last several years now. It's really becoming popular, and I'm glad that it is, because it really does. It plays a big role in a lot of different systems in our health, and it seems to impact nearly every system in our body. So it helps modulate inflammation, plays a role in weight management. A lot of our neurotransmitters are produced in our gut, so it impacts our mental health. It's where we digest food and absorb our nutrients. So if, you could be eating the healthiest diet in the world, but if you've got something going on with your gut where you're not absorbing the nutrients, you're not really getting the full benefits of all those healthy foods, right? Immunity, a lot of our immune system lies in our gut. We know that now. And it's also a key player in the development of autoimmunity. So leaky gut, which is basically we have our gut lining and there are cells that are packed together very tightly like this. And their job is to selectively let certain substances like nutrients through. And when we have leaky gut, it starts to kind of lose its integrity. And so it'll just let stuff that's not supposed to go through, and it's going to come in, right? And so that's how we end up with immune reactions, because something that's not supposed to have passed from our gut into our blood has, and our body recognizes that as an invader, right? And so that's what can kind of kick off the autoimmune process. But leaky gut is one of 3 things that need to be present in order for autoimmune disease to develop. So if you have a history of autoimmune disease in your family, or you have an autoimmune condition currently, definitely looking at the gut and addressing leaky gut is, I would say, of top priority. There we go. So things to remove or reduce for your gut health. This list should probably look pretty familiar by now. Refined carbohydrates and processed foods. So again, that's like, the white breads, cookies, crackers, cakes, basically any sort of super processed, junky type of food. Alcohol, our gut takes a big hit when we drink alcohol. And it kind of ties in with the inflammatory effects of it too. So something to consider. Artificial sweeteners have been shown to potentially disrupt the microbiome and can potentially contribute to gut dysbiosis, which is where we have more bad bacteria than good bacteria. And so artificial sweeteners like sucralose, Splenda, aspartame, those kinds of things. Excess sugar. So too much sugar can be problematic because the pathogenic bacteria in our gut feeds on sugar generally. So that's kind of their preferred fuel source. So when we have sugar cravings, sometimes, those can stem from a lot of different reasons. But one of the reasons is that we have some gut dysbiosis going on, and it's the microbes in your gut being like, feed me, I need some sugar, I'm trying to survive. So that's something to keep in mind. And you'll see that like with candida, which is a yeast overgrowth in the gut, right? That really thrives on sugar. So if you were to do like a candida protocol, it would be super low in sugar. So you can kind of starve out that bacteria. And then again, any personal food sensitivities. So like we were talking about before with the food sensitivities, it's causing an inflammatory process. And when you're eating things that you are sensitive to, it's going to cause a gut reaction as well. So things to incorporate to support gut health. This is one of the most boring nutrition recommendations I make, but I think also one of the most important, and that is to eat just a wide variety of plant foods and fiber, right? It's like not a very exciting recommendation, but it is important. A lot of us get stuck kind of buying like the same 5 vegetables every week at the grocery store or eating the same meals. And our gut really appreciates variety because there's lots of different kinds of fibers out there, and you'll find them in different plants. So that can really help the good bacteria in your gut thrive just by simply, eating a wider variety of plant foods. So try swapping out some vegetables in, maybe you're making the same recipe, but you're just using a different vegetable, right? Or you're shopping seasonally, or you're shopping at a farmer's market, or just trying something that you haven't tried before. And then probiotic foods like yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, and kefir are going to be beneficial because they have those probiotics, right? And that's the good bacteria that we do want in our gut. And then there's other gut supportive foods that have shown to be beneficial for the gut, like bone broth, turmeric, and ginger. And then other factors that can impact our gut health, again, sleep, stress, and exercise. So stress can really impact the gut. And I think we know this intuitively, right? A lot of us, when we're stressed, we'll feel it in our stomach, right? We'll feel our digestion shut down, or our stomach will get crampy, or we'll have to go to the bathroom. So there's definitely an impact on from stress on our gut. Also exercise. They've done studies before where, they've taken groups of people who do exercise and don't exercise, and they have different microbiome makeups. And when they start exercising, it shifts and changes. So that's kind of a cool thing. And then environmental toxins. So this might look like, pesticides, things in our water, chemicals in products, makeup, cleaning stuff. So these have the potential to disrupt our gut as well. And then certain medications, so like over-the-counter NSAIDs, like ibuprofen, they can irritate the lining of our gut. That's where that kind of concern comes in. And again, kind of disrupt that integrity between the cell lining. And then PPIs long-term are not great for our gut either. So personalizing it. So I think the biggest thing is finding ways to regularly incorporate these foods in ways that you like and can sustain, right? Because not everybody loves fermented foods. So I recommend trying some different brands and different flavors and seeing what you like, and then figuring out a way to incorporate them into your diet. So are you going to have them, kimchi with eggs and avocado for breakfast, which is a really good combination, by the way. Or throw a little sauerkraut on your salad at lunch, or whatever it might be, just finding ways to incorporate them. And then identifying any personal food sensitivities through an elimination diet. Like I said before, if you have any sort of gut stuff going on, doing an elimination diet is definitely worth it. And then, if you feel like you're trying all the things and you've cut out the foods and you're not getting better, and you're maybe even getting sensitive to more foods, then it's time to dig a little bit deeper and work with a doctor or a naturopath and identify and treat gut infections, because sometimes we have gut infections that we just don't know about, and we just assume that we're, bloated all the time or just have poor digestion, when really treating the infection will really help symptoms. So those were the three foundations to kind of operate from, right? And then I wanted to offer you just a couple other ways to kind of frame food and how we view it. I think a lot of us were conditioned to view food strictly through caloric density, right? So if it's low calorie, then it's healthy. And we're always striving to lower our calories, or do the 100-calorie packs or the lean cuisines, because in our mind, that's healthy. So what I would encourage you to do is try viewing food through its nutrient density instead. So instead of, how low can I get these calories? It's, will this food provide me with the nutrients I need to feel good? Will it provide me with protein so that my blood sugar is balanced, and micronutrients so that I can, work on the inflammation that I've got going on? So those are just some questions you can ask yourself. And then checking your ingredient list too. So oftentimes it's, really long ingredient lists or ingredients you can't identify that you wouldn't like. A good way to think about it is, if you were making this food at home, would you be using these ingredients? Or is it like some weird chemical that you've never heard of? But basically, the more ingredients and the weirder the ingredients, the less likely it's going to contain the things that you need for optimal health, right? We'd consider that an ultra processed food. And then, what can I add to this meal or snack to increase its nutrient density, right? And I think so often we think about, things to eliminate or things to take away. But I like kind of flipping it and being like, okay, what can we add to this to really make it delicious and nutrient dense and satisfying? Okay, and then the last thing that I want to touch on is emotional nourishment, because I work with a lot of people, and almost everyone has something about food, right? We cannot fully take the emotions out of food. There's a lot of emotional charge, and it can impact the way that we, interact with ourselves around food and interact with food. So I believe that your mental state around food is just as important as the food that you're eating. And then it's really worth your time to cultivate a healthy relationship with food, right? Because we eat 2, 3, 4 times a day. And if all of those meal times, are kind of complicated, and you're feeling guilty and feeling, some kind of way about your food, that's not great, right? So it's okay to acknowledge the emotional needs that we have around food as well. So, we have comfort foods, some of us are stress eaters, or if certain foods might have nostalgia, right? So we can't totally take this out. And I think it's important to talk about with food, right? Because if it was so easy to, just not eat certain things or avoid certain things or whatever, we would all be doing it. But we have an emotional attachment to food, and that is totally fine. It's part of being human. Food has, we have a lot of nostalgic memories around it growing up. It signifies connection with our families and communities. So that's important to consider as well. So I just wanted to mention that it's okay to eat something for the emotional nourishment it provides, right? Like, I've just given you some really great foundations to base your food choices off of. But not every meal has to have a vegetable. Not every meal has to be perfect. It's okay to simply eat something because it tastes good and it's part of a social connection or social occasion or something like that. So what I would say is, really try not to dwell on feelings like shame or guilt. I see that a lot, especially with women, where it's like you're ordering the dessert, but you're going to feel bad about eating it the whole time. And then it's kind of like, what's the point? Like, enjoy it if you're going to enjoy it. And if you're just going to have all these negative emotions around it, that can really be more detrimental for your health than whatever it is you're eating itself. So don't dwell on those feelings, enjoy it thoroughly, and then move on and continue on with your nutrient dense diet. So keep in mind that health is a pattern. It's what you do most of the time, right? So one meal is not going to make or break you. And I think a lot of people have this sort of black and white mentality, right? Where you're either on the train or you're off the train, and there's not a lot of middle ground. And that's what kind of, that's what can mess people up, is like, they're like, oh, I've been doing so well and I've been eating so well, but then I had this, this one meal with my neighbor, and well, then I just figured I already, messed it up. So I just kept going. And so kind of getting away from that all or nothing, black or white thinking, and realizing that, we can eat really, really great all week and then go out to pizza dinner on Saturday and enjoy the pizza. And we can wake up Sunday and just go back to our, nutrient dense diet that we're doing. So it doesn't have to be so all or nothing. And then I also think it can be fun to find healthier versions of the things that you love. So there's a lot of products and brands out there today that are making just healthier versions of things, and they're delicious. So maybe you get to enjoy them a little bit more often, or you don't feel so bad after eating them. And that can be like a really fun thing to do with your kids or loved ones too, is, finding just some healthier versions of the things that you love. So thank you so much for your time and attention tonight. If you are interested in doing a deeper dive on all of this nutrition stuff, you can schedule with me at Ripple. Here's Ripple's contact information. And I have 2 packages to really support you. So everybody that I work with, we start out with the initial consultation. So it's a longer appointment where I'm getting your full health history, lifestyle. We really dig into everything. And then we come up with a plan going forward, and typically some action items for you to start working on. My larger package, we have 3 follow-up sessions. So that's really great for ongoing support and accountability. And if you're trying to make bigger lifestyle changes, right? And then the smaller package has just 1 follow-up consultation. And that's perfect for, if you just kind of like need a check-in or a motivation, or you're working on something really specific and you kind of just want to check in and tune up. Next class that we have coming up is with our naturopathic doctor, Dr. Cox. It's about maintaining cognitive function and brain health, which is super important. And that's in a couple weeks, and that is through the Camus Library. So you'll have to register through them. And then, like I mentioned, if you wanted to be added to our email list, go ahead and drop your email in the chat to be added. You can also check the event calendar on our website. Events tend to quiet down during the summer, but they'll pick back up in the fall. And then you can also follow us on Instagram at Ripple Wellness. And with that, we will move this over to questions. So if you have a question, feel free to turn your mic and or your camera on, or drop it in the chat, and I will do my best to answer.
There's a question in the chat. Is honey considered a bad sugar?
That's a really good question. So I would consider honey as a natural sweetener. In terms, it really depends what you're looking at, right? If we're looking at blood sugar, will honey have an impact on your blood sugar? Yes. Does it also potentially have other, beneficial compounds in it that would make it perhaps a better choice than just regular sugar? Yes. So I would consider that, a natural sweetener. And, if it's helpful, the things that I tend to use to sweeten things when I'm cooking at home, honey and maple syrup are definitely my go-tos. I like coconut sugar. And then occasionally, depending on what I'm making, it'll just call for powdered sugar, and I will just use that too. So hopefully that sort of answers your question. Okay. Is oatmeal with blueberries a good breakfast? That would not be my first breakfast of choice, to be totally honest with you. And the reason for that is oatmeals are heavier in carbohydrates, right? And you don't have any protein or fat with that to kind of buffer it and balance it out. So what I always say is, if you are going to eat oatmeal for breakfast, I would pair it with a protein. So I would have it alongside maybe some eggs or some breakfast sausage, something like that. And you could add like some nut butter in there, or coconut oil or something like that to add a little bit of healthy fats. The blueberries are great in there too, but preferably, doing something with a little bit more protein to keep your blood sugar stable. Oh, this is a good question. What's a better choice? Ezekiel flatbread or white bread that I make from scratch? So Ezekiel, if for those who haven't heard of it, or maybe you haven't seen it in the store, it's typically it depends where you go, but a lot of times it's in the frozen section and it's in brightly colored packaging, and it's a sprouted bread basically, and they're organic grains. This is a tough one. I do love Ezekiel because it's sprouted, so that makes it easier on digestion, increases the nutrient content of it. So, you know, as far as bread recommendations, I usually recommend sourdough or that Ezekiel bread. The white bread that you make from scratch, I would say it depends on the quality of the flour. So if you're using like a nice organic flour that's, you know, maybe not so processed, maybe it's some places will do like stone ground or hand milled, things like that, and it retains a little bit more of the fiber and nutrients. I think that could be really good too. That's kind of a tough one. I would say honestly, the handmade white bread is going to be better than the store, but I do like Ezekiel for the fact that it is sprouted. Okay. Have I used experience with any of the blood sugar monitors? So blood sugar monitors recommendations are easiest to follow choice. So I actually haven't personally used one yet. That's on my list to do. I know Nutrisense is one that's available where you can just like order it online yourself. And then typically if doctors prescribe them, I believe it's the Freestyle Libra ones that they'll get. So those are the two that I've heard the most about. Is the sugar in dates bad? Oh, dates are a good natural sweetener too. So I like dates because they're attached to fiber and nutrients and things like that, right? So, you know, and I would encourage you also to kind of get away from like, is the sugar good or bad, right? Because it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just what's our goal and what are we looking to support, right? So if we're wanting to use a natural sweetener, do dates work? Yes, absolutely. And I think they're a great choice because of that fiber and nutrient content. If you're eating dates all day and nothing else, that might not be so great for your blood sugar. So it's, take it into context a little bit. Is a grilled cheese sandwich a good lunch/dinner? Well, cheese does have protein. I would prefer you to use, basically anything besides American cheese, because that tends to be ultra processed. So using like, a nicer cheese, a bread, again, I'd recommend either sourdough or the Ezekiel bread. And then I would love to see some protein added to that too, because that would kind of help balance the blood sugar effects from the bread itself. So maybe that's putting chicken on your grilled cheese sandwich, or, even having it alongside a salad with a source of protein on the salad too. I think that would just make it more filling, more blood sugar friendly, and more nutrient dense. Ezekiel flax bread. Okay. Yeah. Is potato salad good for you? I mean, I personally love potatoes. I'm definitely a potato girl. I do like potato salad. It's really going to depend on how it's made and the ingredients that you use, right? So I do love potato salad because when potatoes, and this is kind of an interesting thing, potatoes and rice, when they're cooked and cooled, they create something called resistant starch, which is actually great for your gut health, and they have a lower impact on your blood sugar. So actually cooked and cooled potatoes, like you would find in potato salad, can be more blood sugar friendly. But then I would just pay attention to, the other ingredients that you're putting in that potato salad. Because if we're using a mayo that's made from canola oil, for example, that might not be great. I would prefer like an avocado oil based mayo or an olive oil based mayo. Yeah. Is wheat bread good for you? If you don't have a gluten intolerance, or a gluten sensitivity or something like that, bread's actually a complicated one because there's a lot of things at play. There's the way that we've hybridized the wheat that we grow. There's the fact that we use glyphosate on all our wheat crops in the US. And then there's the way that we actually, the companies, I should say, are producing the wheat bread, right? So they're adding sugar, preservatives, oils, weird stuff to make it really soft and fluffy like we like it, and then to also make it shelf stable. So, when it comes to bread, my first choices would be a sourdough bread or the Ezekiel bread. Those would be my top two choices. And I would, if it doesn't seem to be a problem for you and you can find an organic brand with minimal ingredients and it doesn't seem to, bother your stomach or give you any symptoms or anything, then I would say that's okay. Favorite food choices. That's so general. Well, I have a lot of favorite foods, but my favorite food choices, I'll just kind of tell you like what I'm currently loving right now. So what I'm loving right now for breakfast is chicken sausages that I actually get at Costco. I know there's a lot of Costco goers out there. So I love doing chicken sausages with a variety of vegetables. So I will do roasted potatoes. I love doing sauteed cabbage and onions. It's a really good flavor. It's adding different fibers and things like that. And so kind of making like a breakfast hash out of that. And then, potentially adding some avocado or some sauerkraut to that to kind of boost it up. My favorite no cook, super easy meal right now sounds silly, but they're these like little turkey roll-ups that I make. So I get, my preference is the Siete Foods tortillas. They're grain-free tortillas. So they have like a cassava version and an almond flour version. And then I get some good quality turkey deli meat. Applegate typically makes deli meat that's pretty good quality. So if you can find the Applegate, that's good. They don't do the added nitrates and nitrites and everything like that. So I will literally just, put some turkey in the roll up with mustard and lettuce and roll it up and eat a couple of those for lunch. Usually with a side of like some veggies or some fruit or some chips, depending on how I'm feeling. And that's a pretty satisfying, easy no-cook meal. Let's see. Do I have an opinion on superfoods or is it still everything in moderation? Really good question. I think superfoods, it's funny. I think it's maybe almost more like a marketing term, right? We basically superfoods, things that have been identified as superfoods are just things that are known to be high in antioxidants, right? They tend to be more exotic. So we're looking at like the acai and the spirulina and kind of more obscure things, but we have a lot of superfoods in our kitchen right now at our fingertips. So berries, dark leafy greens, good quality protein. I would consider all of those things superfoods too. So it's kind of looking at the nutrient density of the food. So it doesn't have to be exotic or expensive or hard to get to be considered a superfood. Do I have a favorite sourdough? Good question. The Columbia River one is good and pretty accessible. Other than that, they can be kind of a good sourdough can be hard to find. So, I would check at the farmer's market too and see if there's a good purveyor or option there. Sometimes bakeries are kind of hit or miss, so you'll have to go check and talk to somebody. But the Columbia River ones, I think, are pretty accessible and available, so that's a really great choice. Or if you want to, take up a sourdough hobby, that's probably like number one choice, but that requires a little foresight and legwork. So I know that's not possible for everyone. All right, we still have some time. So if you have any more questions, throw them in the chat. All right, have I answered all of your questions about nutrition for the evening. I'll give it another minute or so. The healthiest cheese. Okay, healthiest cheese. That's a good question. I would just say, as you know, least processed as you can find. It's going to be basically anything besides American cheese. So, you know, goat cheese and sheep's milk cheese tend to work really well for people. If you do okay with dairy and cow's milk, then like an aged cheese, like a cheddar, something like that can be really nice. But I think cheese, it really comes down to preference. If we're talking protein, I know that Parmesan cheese has the highest protein content of all the cheeses. So, but anything like that would work. I think that's really more based on your preference. Agave. So I don't recommend agave, and that has more to do with the composition, the types of sugars that are used. And it was kind of marketed as a healthy alternative sweetener for a long time. But it actually has pretty high levels of fructose. So we, you know, kind of know the health risks that are associated with high fructose corn syrup, and agave is basically just like a healthier natural version of that. So because it has higher fructose levels, it can be hard on your liver. So it's kind of like a double whammy with, you know, a blood sugar hit, and it also needs to go to the liver to be processed. So generally I don't recommend agave. Favorite nut butter, or do I rotate them? I do tend to rotate my nut butters. I honestly get the ones from Costco a lot. So they have like a really great almond butter or mixed nut butter. Peanut butter is one of those things for me. I don't feel great if I'm eating a lot of peanut butter. I can do it every once in a while, but I don't do it regularly just because for me, it upsets my stomach. I also love sunflower seed butter for a nut-free option. And I do think it's a good idea to kind of rotate through them and include variety in there too, because nuts can pop up as a food sensitivity. And you'll see that where someone's like eating almond butter in their smoothie every single day. And a lot of these healthified products have nuts in them too, right? So I would be just mindful about where you're consuming nuts and how much of them. And nut butter, it's like a lot of nuts in a small package. How do you feel about the cottage cheese everything trend happening? Good source of protein. I personally love that cottage cheese is making a comeback because I loved cottage cheese when I was little, and it was like everyone always thought it was kind of gross. It is a good source of protein. Like a cup has like over 20 grams of protein. So it's a really great source of protein if you like it. My personal favorite way to eat it, there's a sugar-free jam. The brand is escaping me right now, but it's got like a little bear on it, but it's a strawberry jam, but it doesn't have added sugar. It has some added grape juice. Super good combination. I tried the viral cottage cheese protein ice cream. It was okay. It was pretty good, but if you let it freeze all the way, it gets really hard and icy. So that was my only kind of thing that I didn't like about it. But yeah, it's a really great protein to have on hand for sure. Stevia, I think it's a natural sweetener. It does not have an impact on your glucose levels, and it doesn't seem to really have an impact on, you know, health-wise. It seems pretty safe. I would just keep in mind, you know, if you have any gut stuff going on, stevia and other sweeteners would be a place to look. But if it works for you, stevia works. Good cookbooks in general. That's a tough question because it's going to depend on what you like. Let me think of ones that I've looked at recently. I actually just got from the library, not this library, but a different library. It's Gwyneth Paltrow's like clean plate book or whatever. And I know people have beef with Gwyneth Paltrow, and I don't love everything she does either, but she does have really good recipes. And actually it was one of my clients, she was telling me about like all these, like this cabbage rolls and all these amazing meals she was making. I was like, these sound so good. She's like, yeah, it's from Gwyneth Paltrow's cookbook. So that's a really, really good one. I would honestly just go browse the library or the bookstore and see what jumps out at you and what looks good. Yes, cottage cheese, if you like it and you can tolerate it, it's a great source of protein. And if the texture freaks you out, you could blend it. Because when you blend it, it's like, it's not that chunky texture anymore. It's smooth. So it's more like a yogurt or like a pudding or something. So our taco is good for you. Again, I'm going to kind of emphasize what are we making the tacos with? Because if we're making the tacos with, kind of like crappy flour tortillas, and, some other like really processed pasteurized cheese, things like that, then I don't know that I'd say it's, good for you necessarily, but using, like a good, either an organic flour tortilla or organic corn tortilla, or like I mentioned, those Siete food tortillas, I really enjoy as well. They have a really great texture. Some good quality meat, some seasoning, and then some good quality cheese, and adding some vegetables and things in there. But I really enjoy tacos, and I think they're a wonderful canvas to put a lot of good stuff on there too. Thanks, Jen. Ooh, taco salad. Yeah. Taco salad's great too. That's actually one of my go-to meals that honestly I have a lot and that I recommend to people, is doing a taco bowl. And that's a really, really great way. I call them template meals, where, you have the taco bowl. So you're always going to have like some greens and some protein and some vegetables and some salsa or something like that. And you can kind of switch it out and rotate it, right? So you could do chicken one week, ground beef the next, and kind of rotate the protein, and then also rotate the vegetables that you use in there too. And then if you want to have some tortillas or chips on the side, to add the crunch and the goodness, then you can totally do that. I enjoy lettuce wrap tacos as well. And actually those jicama taco shells, has anyone tried the jicama tacos? They have them at Trader Joe's, but you can also make them yourself. You just get a jicama and slice it really thin. And those are actually very good because they've got like a nice crunch to them. All right.
We're almost at our time. I think maybe we have another minute or two. So I don't know if anyone has any last questions. I'll give you a second to type those in the chat. Otherwise, I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank Emily and Ripple for coming and spending time with us. And take a good look at our online calendar. We do have some other virtual programs coming up as well. And do you have time for one more question?
Sure. Peanut butter and jelly, good, delicious. Peanut butter and jelly is delicious. If I were, kind of looking at it from these foundations that I was just talking about, I would have it on a sourdough or Ezekiel bread, which provides a little bit more nutrient density, is a little bit more blood sugar friendly. Have the peanut butter, and then have jelly. Jam is so good, but it's so high in sugar, right? So finding either just like a reduced sugar jam, or if you can find a no sugar added jam, that would be optimal. But overall, it's it's got a little protein, a little fat in there, and it's very delicious. All right.
Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you,
everyone. Have a great night. Thank you so much.
Bye.